You are listening to Meet the Thriller Author, the podcast where I interview writers of mysteries, thrillers, and suspense books. I am your host, Alan Peterson, and this is episode number 118. In this episode of the podcast, we'll be meeting Rick Mofina, who is a former journalist whose true crime freelance work has appeared in the New York Times, The Telegraph, Reader's Digest, amongst many other publications. He's written more than 20 crime fiction thrillers that have been published in nearly 30 countries, including an illegal translation produced in Iran, which we'll get into during this in this interview. It's a fascinating story. His work has been praised by James Patterson, Dean Koontz, Michael Connelly, Lee Child, Sandra Brown, Tess Gerritsen, and Brad Thor, among others. And his book, Missing Daughter, just won the 2020 Barry Award for Best Paperback Original Mystery Crime Novel. This was just recently now the awards that were announced this weekend at the virtual ButcherCon 2020 conference. I had a great time talking to Rick about his amazing career, so stay tuned for that interview coming right up. Just a heads up of my new Patreon. It's a great way to keep this podcast going. If you head on over to thrillingreads.com/support, you'll get to check that out. I put together some pretty cool rewards for supporters, especially if you're a thriller writer or aspiring writer. So head on over to thrillingreads.com/support and go check that out. All right, here is my interview with Rick Mofina. Hi, everybody. This is Alan with Meet the Thriller Author. And on the phone, I have Rick Mofina, who is a former crime reporter and an award-winning author of several acclaimed thrillers. I'm excited to have him on the show. Welcome to the podcast, Rick.
Thanks for having me, Alan.
You were a journalist for many years. When did you make that transition from reporting about true crime to writing crime fiction, and what was the transition like for you?
Well, it was a smooth one, you might say. I had been writing creatively all my life, ever since I was in grade school, and I actually went to university to study journalism to sort of broaden my horizons, actually to gather experience that I might use later for creative fiction. So it wasn't until I was on the night desk, the night police desk, that everything gelled. I found something that I should write about, and it all came together. So I quietly, without telling anyone, I mean, my wife knew, but I worked away on a book for several years, and then, found an agent and got published, and I was lucky.
Oh wow, yeah, that's awesome. So the first book that you sat down to write, you were able to get that published, huh?
Oh no, actually no. We better back it up. The first book I wrote, I think I was, I was 18 at the time. I hitchhiked, across Canada and down the west coast of the U.S. to San Francisco, coincidentally, and I wrote a book about that, a kind of a Jack Kerouac on the road. I mean, I was only 18. Typed the thing up, and it will never see the light of day. But it allowed me to see I could go the distance. I mean, it was a full novel, pretty much a memoir of the trip. But it was fun. I let my brother read it, and he was younger than me. He just said, "You're weird." So.
Yeah, that's how I found out about your work. Was I remember a couple of years ago seeing one of your covers, and I saw the Golden Gate Bridge, and since I live in San Francisco, I got it, and I really enjoyed your Tom Reed series of books set in San Francisco with a crime reporter. And so you were a crime reporter. Did your personality make it into Tom Reed?
Oh, well, I think there's a little bit of everybody and everything in Tom Reed. I was quite lucky with that series because when I was writing my first book, I had originally set it in Canada, and I was halfway through the draft and stopped because I was sort of got full of self-doubt. But I was fortunate enough to get it to an editor who just suggested in New York, who just suggested I reset it in the U.S. And at that time, I had just come back from an assignment in San Francisco, a crime assignment, met a detective there, and I asked him if he would be my technical advisor if I relocated my book to San Francisco. And back then, it was pre-internet. I got weekend copies of the Examiner and the Chronicle at our local library, poured through them, so that I was sort of, had the feel for the city from my visits. And then I had the good fortune with a homicide inspector with the San Francisco PD who was the technical advisor on all 5 books. It was great.
Oh, okay. Wow, that's fascinating. So yeah, that's got to be like what you said, your journalism training, that you knew how to do all that stuff. Because yeah, I remember reading it. I was surprised when I found out that you were Canadian.
Yeah, I I got dinged by a few people over the life of the series, and it's still out there. One person said that in one of the communities I had the rent a little lower than it would have normally been at the time, and I thought, well, you're getting very technical. I think I did say he did get an amazing find at an amazing rate, but I guess that wasn't enough of a qualifier, so I just chuckled at that. And then when I created a fictional community, my detective guy, he called. He said, we're looking through all the maps here, Rick. We can't find that neighborhood. I couldn't stop laughing. I said, well, I made that one up, Ed. I couldn't use a real one for that particular series. So.
Oh yeah, well, boy, readers really get nitpicky nowadays about things like that, about the rent, and it's just so funny. That's such a small detail.
You name it, I've been called on it. So it's every author. I think we all get that. So.
Yeah. And so, what's your latest book out now? Is that Their Last Secret? Or is that your latest book that's been published?
Yes, Their Last Secret came out basically. It was an August book, and up here it's still, I think, 6 weeks on the bestseller list up here. So yeah, that's the latest one, standalone thriller, and I've got the proof pages for the one that's coming out in March, and that one is set in San Diego and Nevada near Las Vegas, about a family that travels across the country on Interstate 15. They're on their way. They're moving to Pennsylvania, and they take an RV trip, and their teenage daughter goes missing when they stop at a truck stop just south of Las Vegas.
Are those standalones that you're working on now, or are they part of one of your series?
That's right. It seems to be the desire of the publisher are standalone domestic thrillers, and I don't mind writing them. I have a lot of fun doing that. And we've been doing pretty well. I think one of the previous books, Missing Daughter, made the USA Today list. I was quite pleased with that. Yeah, that's where I'm going. Now, I am quietly working on a little project of my own, a trilogy with a reporter series that I will bring out myself. They're going to be short novels. I finished 2 of them already, and I'm just starting to outline and map the third, and there'll only be 3 books in the series. So I'm looking forward to releasing that far and wide. Long as they're shorter, the publisher doesn't mind. You got to respect the contracts that you've signed to. You can't be writing other books and that compete with yourself, sort of thing.
Yeah, boy, you're really prolific. Have you written? I think you have over 20 books out now, or is that?
Yeah, almost closer to 30, considering the ones that are done that haven't been released, and others in development. So I would say close to 30 books.
And so what's your process? So from the time that you get an idea, and then you sit down to start to writing it, and then it gets published. Like what's that process for like for you?
Well, my process evolved a little bit. I have to say that in the early days, before you were published, you had lots of time to ponder ideas, and then when you start to get the good fortune of getting contracts, things ramp up a little bit. So my process is you kick around an idea, and I like to draw on something real, something that I feel as a foundation, as a seed, and then build on that. In my case, a publisher likes an outline. The length is up to me for the outline. I've had them 7 pages. I've had them 60 pages. So I think about the book. You get the researching a little bit, drawing on your own experiences. So you sort of build up and map out a story as to like a blueprint for a story, and that could take a long time because you have some ideas that are always with you. And is it time for this one? Is it time for that one? Or then I come across something that just sparks my interest. Well, what about this? What in real life or something, or a memory, anything. We're always drawing. I think all authors are drawing from everything. So then I sort of outline the thing and discuss it with my agent and my editor. I draw on their input, and then it's usually accepted and I'm contracted, and off I go. And I might expand it. The outline may take a different shape, once it sort of comes to life. And it takes me, on average, 5 to 8 months to draft, to complete the first draft. I work every day. I don't go on word counts. It's just working, just putting in the work. Even if I have a bad day and I'm making a couple notes and just sitting there, or if I have a great day and I'm banging out a whole chapter or two, that's fine too. Just you're always in the work. Always, as I tell my wife, you just keep the factory humming, and things, things get done. They have to get done.
Yeah, well, yeah, especially if you have those deadlines and contracts looming. I guess that probably gets you keeps you on track. I would imagine.
I always say when we're on panels or something at conferences, that what's your inspiration, or do you ever get writer's block? And I said, well, when I used to get writer's block, or I thought I didn't feel like I would pull out the contract, and when you look at those legal terms that the author will deliver on this date, I said that's good inspiration when you're contracted to get to work. So I think it was my friend Linwood Barclay says it's like a plumber. You show up for the job.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've interviewed a lot of writers on this podcast, and that's what they say. That it's their job. You put in your time, you show up to work, and so yeah. It's fascinating too. You mentioned earlier about the writing the domestic thrillers, and I keep seeing that subgenre seems to be so popular right now. What exactly is a domestic thriller?
Well, I don't know if I can actually define it, but I guess for me it would be, it's contemporary in terms of the time setting. It probably involves, people who live in a suburban community, part of a metropolis. I think that kind of thing, some type of family dynamic of some sort. That's the domestic part of it, and what can go wrong. A lot of things can go wrong, but I think that pretty much defines that particular subgenre. I know with the reporting, the reporter books that I wrote, and I've written quite a few, it enabled me to do a lot of stuff. I got a little more adventurous and kind of Jason Bourne-like in some of the storylines. You could say in some cases there were elements of domestic thriller in those as well. But I think coming back to your question, that domestic thriller involves family, I think, relationships, that sort of thing, where things just go wrong, something originating out of the home, as it were, or invading the home or threatening the home. That's the usual plot lines.
And you still how much research are you putting into your books? Do you still falling back on your journalist training to do the proper vetting and research and all that, or how's that going for you now?
Well, it's evolved for me. I think when I wrote, I don't know, maybe at least 8 or 9 books. Well, no, maybe more. 10 books when I was reporting, and then when I was not reporting, I would draw on trips, and I would put in the research. If I went to conferences in a city, and I think a lot of us did the same thing, I would take a little side trip and sponge up whatever I could in terms of locale and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so what's the story and the plot of your latest book on their Last Secret?
Their Last Secret is a book. For the first time, I really jumped back and forth with the two timelines. It opens with a crime 20 years ago, and then it jumps at crime in Canada 20 years ago, and then it jumps to present-day California, sort of the Orange County, San Bernardino area of California. That storyline concerns a homicide, multiple homicides in a very small, forgotten community, a fictional community on the prairies, the plains, where these 3 girls who are just turned 14, they're bored out of their mind. They grew up in this town. They know everything about this town. There's nothing to do here. And they get caught up, and they're from rough families. They got, their lives, even at 14, have not been easy. Broken homes, deaths in their family, that sort of thing. Some abuse and that. So these 3 girls form an alliance where they are going to go into the home of a very wealthy local family and take the money they believe is owed one of them. And, of course, there's a terrible tragedy, and there's a homicide. And we follow the homicide and the trial, jump to present day. because the girls of their age, their identities were changed and concealed. So now that they're all adults and they've served their time and they've been released, they're still relatively young women, and they're getting on with their lives. So we don't know who's who, and we don't know exactly what happened that night, who actually did what. So it builds that way where there's a threat against the current one of the current girls who's trying to rebuild her life.
Well, that sounds awesome. I'll have to put that in my to read pile. Yeah, I really love your covers too. Is that do you have any input on that, or is that the publisher doing that? Those are all your covers are really awesome.
Yeah, I have. I don't have veto. I know some authors have veto on everything, depending on where you are in the food chain. But I do have input, and they come to me first. They say, what are your suggestions? What are your concept ideas? Send us everything. That's usually how it works. So I kick around some ideas and stuff. And then they send something back and say, well, this is what we think. And it's back and forth. But their stuff is usually fantastic. Always fantastic. So sometimes it's exactly what I suggested, and other times they said, hey, you know what? We just had this new idea. What do you think? So it's a very collaborative effort.
Checking out that you've been published in over, your books have been translated and published in nearly 30 countries, which must be so surreal to see your book all over the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I noticed on your website you said that there's an illegal translation in Iran. I didn't realize there was a market for Western crime thrillers in Iran. How was that to see that? Was that kind of bizarre for you?
That's a whole episode unto itself. I mean, back in the day, I would always, and a lot of people do, I go online, you search everywhere. Oh, I wonder about this book. Search your title, search your book. Search libraries that pick up your book. That's usually, and one day, If Angels Fall came up in a library in Western Australia, and it said Farsi edition, and I went to myself, well, that's odd, because we had not sold many of the foreign rights. We own the foreign rights. And I knew for a fact, because I have to sign the contract if there's a foreign edition, we did not sell a Farsi edition. And I thought that must be some kind of problem with the library, a mistake of some sort. It doesn't exist. But there was a picture of it, and it had the actual cover, and there was some Farsi or like type of, Arabic type of writing, I guess. Forgive me if I've got that wrong. So I made an intra-library loan. I don't know if you're familiar with how that's done, where I'm my local library, and you pay the fee for the shipping and the wait. And I wanted to have that book in my hand, and there it was. I had it. I had to give it back. I wanted to keep it. Then I was still reporting, and I started some detective work, and I was angry. Oh, I was livid. And my publisher couldn't do anything about it. My agent said, let it go, it happens. I started tracking things down. I wrote to the library in Australia, where did you buy this book? It's an illegal edition, and blah, 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 blah. And they were a bit uneasy, and they gave me the names of a vendor in Australia who dealt with a vendor in the Bay Area, coincidentally. And then I had a friend at the Wall Street Journal, and I had a friend at the LA Times, and I said, well, how about this for a story? Crime reporter, crime author tracks down this illegal, because there were certain trade regulations in the U.S. that you could not do this, and I couldn't prove it, but it seemed that there was some kind of vendor in California was involved in illegal publications to be sent around the world out of Iran. So my friend at the Times and the Wall Street Journal was interested, but we couldn't put things together. We couldn't nail things down, so I sort of let it go. I called a international trade lawyer, copyright lawyer. She said, I'll give you one free session. She said, this is what will happen. We'll contact a lawyer in Tehran. They'll contact the publisher. They'll try to get them to come into court. They'll say they have no money. You'll have to pay the lawyer in Tehran. You'll have to pay us, and you won't get anything. So, it's hard to enforce. And they were doing knockoffs, just like everyone around the world, of everything Western. That's what I'd learned. There was a appetite for things Western in Iran, especially by a young demographic. So books, movies, everything, TVs, watches, you name it. So I just took it as a badge of honor then. So.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I'm well aware of the whole pirating and stuff, but that's a whole production, like to actually translate your book, and that's like a whole underground publishing business.
Oh yeah, they did a nice job. It was a beautiful volume, and I thought I should have just kept it. I was indebted then to the libraries. It was the whole thing. I love libraries, and I thought, well, I couldn't say I lost the book. and give them $80. That was what I was going to do. Say I lost the book and just keep and give them $80 for it because I wanted that copy. And I tried to get it back years later. I thought I'll just buy it. I just want to keep it because it was a beautiful edition. And the way they have the Golden Gates on there from the first cover, the same. Like it was great. And in the end, I laughed it all off. I mean, my anger just melted because I realized. And I met other authors. I think there was a guy at the International Thriller Writers Conference. He was getting calls and notes that he was a bestseller in Argentina or something. And again, it was on the list, and it was a pirated copy. They'd never sold the rights, and someone produced it. And not only did they sell it well, it was on the bestseller list. And he was getting nothing. Well, just like I got nothing for my book. So that's just the way it goes. So.
Yeah, so many scams and stuff out there. Just it makes it kind of frustrating. But what can you do?
Yes, that's right.
And so, do you miss being a journalist at all, or is just you're having too much fun as a novelist?
Oh, when I think back to all the fun and exciting stories I did, I miss those. When I think back to the hard, emotionally draining or just plain hard work stuff, I don't miss that. But, I remember the deadlines could be, pretty gut-twisting back in the day. And I think it's even worse now, as my friends who are still in the business say, the deadline is all the time now. So I do miss parts of it. Certainly miss the newsroom fun. I mean, there were times we would be on assignments. When I say we, I'm usually was with a photographer. If it was going well, we thought we couldn't believe we were being paid for this when we're having a good time. But that wasn't always the case.
And you, when you're writing your books, what scenes do you find that are more challenging to write than others, or do you not have an issue with that, like writing?
Oh well, all the scenes can be pretty tough to write. All of them can be challenging because you want them to be the best they can possibly be and the truest they can possibly be. So you always, I guess, maybe like an actor, you try to find something real, especially if they're emotional scenes that you've experienced or someone else has experienced in terms of making the scene real and making sure you hit all the right notes and points in a scene. And my wife and my editor, my agent, my wife is my number one editor. They'll correct you. Well, when you're writing a scene, wouldn't someone think about this, or they wouldn't say that, because you don't want the big eye-rolling part of a scene. You want it to be totally true. Technical stuff is different. That's totally different. And that's when it gets a little scary. When you're writing a scene that involves some technical stuff, you've done all your research, but you want your character to be, responding in a way that, when I have a police friend read a book and say, well, we would never, ever do this in the investigation, or we would definitely do this, your guy's got to do this, And if it's a problem and I'm really twisting things, I'll say, well, give me an example or a reason why they wouldn't. And sometimes that adds to the drama. Well, if someone's sloppy in their work or someone's got another reason to do it a different way, they might suggest this, that sort of thing. And I remember one scene that was pretty difficult. I had to, it involved dental stuff. It wasn't so much dental forensics. So I asked my personal dentist to help me out, and he was delighted. He told me exactly how it would read. And when I wrote the scene, it was a critical scene. It went quite well, and I got some emails from dental hygienists who said that was exactly the way it would happen. Said,
oh, wow. That's a great compliment.
That's always, that's nice when you hear that. When Free Fall was a book about aircraft accidents, jetliners crashing around the world, and they were the storyline in that one was that what if you could hijack the control systems of a jetliner in flight, which had been raised in some recent tragedies as a hypothetical, and the super aeronautical engineers saying no, they're isolated sites, you can't do it, but there was speculation you could do it from the towers. And if you remember, after September 11th, there was talk, and I got President Bush's speech, where they would, if a plane was hijacked in flight, that the tower could take control from the ground, and you could not control the plane from the air, and they could land it safely. They were exploring that type of technology. pilots had issues with that, as I recall. But that was enough as a big what if. But what if it could be done? And what if you had someone with ulterior motives who were maybe young technical wizards, like a young MIT and Caltech student who were a boy and a girl who were in love with each other, and they were like super geniuses. And one was the daughter of an aeronautical engineer and knew everything. So I started playing around with that. So I did a lot of research and work on that one. I had a National Transportation Safety Board retired crash investigator. He went through some of the stuff with me and was telling me, well, this wouldn't happen, that wouldn't happen. But I had enough technical stuff to make it ring true. And I got accident reports of other crashes so that I could sort of fake it, as it were. And then one thing I did that I just got carried away with, but it was a lot of fun. I thought, okay, if my MIT person is a super genius and I need some technical references to certain systems within the aircraft, what's the top school for aeronautical engineers? And it was MIT. I said, okay, if an aeronautical engineer is going for their PhD, that sort of thing, or a master's degree, what type of exam would they write? So I found the exam online. Now, well, what type of questions would they be asked? So you had all that technical stuff. I found the exam questions, and I went, oh, that sounds, and then opposite applied to the systems I was talking about. Even though I didn't know what I was doing, I thought, well, that fits. I had a lot of fun with that. So, and one of the compliments I got was a couple, jetliner pilot, commercial airliner pilot, so just read your book. Goes, there's a few eye-rolling things, but not bad, pretty good. That's all I said, not bad, pretty good. And then one of the best ones was, I'm not sure if she was with Delta or one of the U.S. airline, maybe American, and she sent me an email. She said, I'm a flight attendant, and I forget what airline it was. She said, I was reading your book in flight, and I remember this, as we were making our approach into Dallas, and my colleague had to nudge me to make the descent announcements because I was reading your book, and I thought, well, you're reading a book about airline disasters on an airline. I just shook my head at that one.
Yeah, that's not a good one. I remember that movie Airplane when they're showing the airplane crashes on the on the TV. Yeah, that's not a good one. Yeah, it's so fascinating too. Like you were saying, like you get started with the what if. I've read that a lot from other authors too. That it all starts with what ifs. Since that's so cool.
Oh yeah, that's the greatest. That's the spark, I think. Another time, I was with my family, and we were at a large harbor front where there was all kinds of kiosk, commercial, very like a carnival-like atmosphere. And a lot of cruise ships and that sort of thing. And I was with my wife and our two kids. This is back quite a few years ago. And we're walking around and they're shopping. And I said, well, let's keep it going and we'll just go into the next one. I went to the next one and it's crowded and busy. And I turned around and I couldn't find my family. And I walked around for about 5-10 minutes. I could not find them anywhere. And until then I did. And I said to my wife, this is, and she goes, and she nodded to all the ships and stuff, said, well, there you go. There's your story. She had to point me to a seed of an idea, and I got thinking about, well, what if a guy's family disappeared on him for whatever reason and got caught up in a sort of a, I don't know, North by Northwest thing, that the mistaken identity, and they were grabbed, and so that once you got the seed, you get going. It can be a lot of fun.
All right, Rick. Well, before I let you go, I always like to ask. One thing I always like to ask is what tools do you use to write your books? Do you use like Word or some other type of software or anything?
Just plain old. I've got to look it up. I think it's Word. Yeah. I think I got 10. Word 10? Is that the word? Is that the program it's called?
Oh yeah, I don't know what version they are in now.
Yeah. Because I had 7. I was way back in the day, and the publisher said, look, you've got to upgrade because we don't deal with that, and we're having all kinds of technical problems. So I paid, and I think it cost more than the computer because I just had an old thing. So I think that's what I have. I have Word 10. I have an iPad, which I use for travel, but I just write on an old, cheap PC, which I have to actually upgrade pretty soon. It's starting to run down on me. But yeah, Word. That's my writing process, and I make notes wherever I go. I didn't have to when I was younger, but I do now because if I I have a great idea and I go to sleep, I'll wake up in the morning, my mind is just wiped clean. I go, what? I can't remember that. So I write them down.
Yeah, I hate that too. You know that you had a good idea, but it's gone.
Oh, yeah. I've lost many a book has just disappeared on. So I've got little notepads here and there, and then when I walk with the phone too, I'll stop and send a message to myself. That sometimes is the best way. I'll just stop and type a little message when I'm walking. Go, that's a great idea, and send it to myself, and let that percolate for a while. But yeah, you're always all the time. So.
And any advice that you have for aspiring writers who are listening to this right now?
Yeah, just listen to yourself. I'm very opinionated on a few things. I did go to one writing group, and that didn't work for me. You don't write by committee. You don't write to seek approval. Write for yourself. Trust yourself, and put in the work. I remember when I was writing the first one, I was the employee and I was the CEO at the same time, and I used to say, if you want to get this done, get up and do it, because I got up early in the morning back in the day and wrote before I went in to report. I would say I'm going to pay myself first. I get a few pages in and pay myself, because at the end of the day I was tired. So I would get the work done. So find the time, get the work done. If you want it to be a serious endeavor, you got to treat it seriously. You got to believe in yourself. If you think you have the tools, and you just know in your gut that you do, or you don't, and don't make excuses. Make sentences. That's the old thing I would say. Make notes. Don't get caught up in word counts. Don't get caught up in computer programs and all of that. Those are all distractions. It's about people and story and what you believe in, and can you go the distance? And you can. When you get it, and you want to get inspired, and I used to do this too, go into the public library and stand there. Look at all those books. They were all written by mortals. They all had problems and tragedies. Dostoevsky was writing while his wife was dying in the next room, and he was still writing. Mark Twain, suffered tragedy. They all had tragedies. They all had challenges. Mary Higgins Clark typing away on her kitchen counter while she was raising kids as a single mom. So everyone's got a problem to deal with in their lives, problems. You just got to make this part of your life, that you are going to do it and do it for the reason that you want to do it. Not the whole sold my first book and it's a movie and a multi-million-dollar bestseller. Those are lottery wins. You're happy for people who do that and a little envious, but you got to believe in yourself as to why you're doing it and that you can do it, and it'll get done. If you're not writing, if you're a true writer, you're not writing every day or working on something, you feel empty inside. You just got to do it, and that's how I always felt ever since I was in grade school, just sitting down and writing short stories. So that's a long-winded seminar on how to get motivated.
No, but it's fantastic. Yeah, thank you so much, because that's so much truth in there of getting distracted with fancy softwares and all this. Yeah, it's all just excuses not to write, basically. And so the best place for readers to find you online would be your website, rickmofina.com.
Yeah, if they want to start there, there's the pull downs of all the books and a complete list, and everything's there. Yeah, you can find me there. That's the website's better than Facebook. That's where I interact with people, and Instagram a little bit, and Twitter. But if you want to learn more about me, Facebook, yeah, or rickmofina.com.
All right, Rick. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Really enjoyed talking with you.
Oh, I enjoyed it, Al. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to the Meet the Thriller Author podcast. Be sure to visit thrillerauthors.com to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover great thrilling reads. If you enjoy the podcast, I'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review to it, wherever it is that you're listening to this podcast, be it iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, wherever it is that you're listening to this right now. I would appreciate it. And please do check out my own thriller novels over at my website at alanpeterson.com. Until next time.